And I now give the floor to the permanent representative of Sri Lanka.
Thank you, our Chairman, Ambassador Manalo, for giving me the floor, and may I congratulate you on your leadership of the Commission. Mr. Chairman, throughout human history, the world's population had grown at a slow pace, and by the beginning of the 20th century was only 1.6 billion. Today, after only perhaps 110 years, the world's population has surpassed 7.1 billion. During this time, the world has witnessed tremendous development, including innovations in healthcare, education, infrastructure, and technology. But ironically, more than 2 billion still live in poverty and remain out of this progress. The great challenge leaders of the world face today, Mr. Chairman, is to reduce poverty and inequity and improve people's lives without compromising the environment and the well-being of future generations. At the same time, world population continues to increase by more than 80 million people a year, with most of the growth occurring in the world's least developed countries. By 2050, according to the United Nations median projection, the world's population will increase to 9.6 billion people and will continue to grow through the years. This continued growth has strong implications for health, well-being, and economic development. Leaders of nations everywhere must ask themselves, how does population growth affect national development, and what must be done to manage the challenges of population growth? Mr. Chairman, with 7.5 billion people living on the planet and projected 9.5 billion by 2050, our focus is on examining the most nuanced trends and important challenges in this century. Sri Lanka welcomes the theme of this session, population and sustainable development, in particular sustained and inclusive economic growth. With 8 years at hand for the realization of the goals envisioned in the 2030 agenda, Sri Lanka is willing to partner in the challenge towards achieving the development goals stipulated. The government of Sri Lanka remains committed to deliver inclusive, equitable, and sustainable development, respecting and protecting individual rights, freedoms, and dignity as recognized in the ICPD Program of Action. It is common ground that population and development ordinarily refers to the consideration of consequences of behavioral patterns on socio-economic development, human welfare, and the natural environment. Therefore, the quantity, quality, structure, distribution, and mobility of population can have a positive or negative impact on the rate of economic growth. There is, therefore, a correlation between population and development. The demand for resources grows is commensurate with that of the human demand. It has become a challenge to maintain sustainability of the limited resources, while also ensuring equitable distribution of the same amongst the wider section of the community. Mr. Chairman, our people in Sri Lanka play a central role and are committed and sensitive to the importance of sustainable development. The national policy framework of the government of Sri Lanka, constituting policies that achieving the fourfold outcomes of a productive citizenry, a contented family, a disciplined and just society, and a prosperous nation, prioritizes various aspects of the development of our population, which is currently at 21.8 million and growing. In the policy dealing with the pandemic, the government has had to adhere to a number of measures aimed at protecting the vulnerable sections of the community, inclusive of the aged. As the nationwide lockdown, we were sensitive to the possibility of gender-biased violence, sexual and reproductive health, and other related psychosocial issues, and took measures well ahead in time to mitigate the attendant contingencies. We consider that inclusive development rests on equal opportunities at the workplace. When our labor force participation is considered, approximately 35% is female. We have also enacted necessary legal and structural mechanisms to ensure gender parity in our workforce. The national framework in policy also aims to harness the contribution of women to the development of the country by regulating, standardizing, and expanding childcare facilities in order to facilitate increased women participation in the labor force. introducing flexible working arrangements for young mothers, and by introducing home-based enterprise with required assistance for rural women. Mr. Chairman, in conclusion, let me reiterate the commitment of my delegation to the successful implementation of the program of action of the ICPD in the context of the contemplated outcomes of the 2030 agenda. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the permanent representative of Sri Lanka.